Hello again and welcome to another TryHard Diablo 3 class guide. Today we'll be covering the Barbarian. We'll be going over things such as gear, spec, playstyle, stats, and a few tips and tricks to keep you alive while playing. Hopefully this guide will get you a bit more comfortably through Acts 1, 2, 3, and 4 on the Inferno difficulty. So we're going to get today started off with the spec, followed by the gear, and then I'll go over some stat priorities, and finally a few playstyles that'll hopefully, make things a bit more comfortable for you. Alright, let's get started with the spec. Now the spec I'm going to show you is probably the most comfortable spec you can play with on your Barbarian for survival while doing some decent DPS at the same time. So this is the first primary skill you want to use. You want to use Frenzy. I'm sure you're familiar with it. I'm pretty sure most people have used it in the past. It has a component which gives you 75% increased attack speed, stacking buff. So every time you hit them you get a stack 15. This goes hand in hand with life on hit, so as your life on hit gets higher, obviously you're attacking really fast, you're getting lots of life back, so it keeps you alive really well. It's single target attack, but with the sidearm room it adds a bit of AoE. It's 25% chance to do 110% weapon damage to all enemies in a path. So it adds just a bit of kind of extra AoE in there, which is always decent. You can swap that sidearm rune for the, which one is it? I think it's Maniac, which gives you 20% increased damage with your 5 stacks, which is a bit more DPS, but I prefer the AoE damage for trash packs, etc., and kind of horde affix mobs as well. So that's your main primary. Your second skill you want to use will be Wrath of the Berserker with Insanity. So this is your major cooldown. Gives you 10% crit chance, 25% increased attack speed, 20% dodge, 20% movement speed. So in other words, it makes you pretty much just a killing machine for the 15 seconds it's on for. And you want to go with the Insanity rune. You can swap that for whatever you want, but I prefer the Insanity. 100% increased damage, so your damage skyrockets when you use this cooldown. It's pretty much like guaranteed to kill an elite pack when you find one every 2 minutes, which is really nice. So that's what you want to use for your second skill. Now your defensive skill, I prefer Ignore Pain. It's 65% reduced damage for 5 seconds, and then with Ironhide increases it to 7 seconds. This can be swapped for anything. I personally think this is probably one of the more comfortable skills you can use Stay Alive with, though. It's on a 30-second cooldown, which makes it really good. You can swap the rune for Ignorance is Bliss, which gives you 20% life kind of steal for all damage dealt. So, I mean, that's really nice, but I prefer the 7 seconds of, like the extra 2-second duration. It seems like you can sustain a lot more damage, and if your life on hit's decent, then you'll kind of life steal that amount anyways, just for 7 seconds. So, I'd probably say use that as your defensive skill. You can also use Leap instead of Ignore Pain if your damage gets a bit better. Leap is really good for mobility. You can jump up kind of ledges, you can jump away from throws and jump over wallers. You can stay alive with that really well. But if you're good at ignoring that stuff anyways, you can just use Ignore Pain regardless. If you do use Leap, try to go for Iron Impact, which is 300% increased armor for 4 seconds, which makes you, pretty defensive when you pop it. It's really nice. So there's that. Okay, so you want to use Revenge in your build, definitely. This is your main kind of healing spell, especially when you're getting hit by lots of enemies at once. So it does 220% weapon damage, which is really good, and it heals you for 5% for every enemy you hit. So if you hit 10 enemies, 50% of your life. If you hit, 20 enemies, 100%. Don't know how many, don't know when you're gonna have 20 enemies around you, but it could happen. You want to go for Provocation. That's it. Yeah, sorry, I'm awesome at pronouncing things. Provocation. That gives you a 30% increased kind of chance for this to proc. Well, it's 15% increased chance. It gives you 30% chance when hit to proc this. So it's up constantly. I mean, if you're getting hit by a few mobs at once, you can literally just spam Revenge, healing you over and over. So I'd say that's almost crucial in the build for survival. And it's really good for damage as well. You'll find you'll do most of your AoE damage using Revenge. Okay, so the next skill you want to use is Battle Rage. This can also be swapped for anything. If you're not as comfortable surviving, you might want to swap it for a few things. I'll show you that after, though. So this is pretty much your main DPS spell. It gives you 3% critical chance, and then with Marauder's Rage it gives you 30% increased bonus damage, which is huge. I mean, that's quite a bit of DPS to use. So, I mean, like I said, you can swap this. This is pure damage. If you want to swap this for something, I'd recommend swapping it if you're having still problems staying alive. Swap it for Threatening Shout. This reduces enemies' damage by 20% for 15 seconds, and has quite a few other kind of bonuses you can do. Attack speed reduction is the one I'd probably recommend, which is Falter. So it would reduce their damage by 20% and it would reduce their attack speed by 15% for 5 seconds. So that's really, really nice defensive components on that. Other than that, I mean, the other ones aren't too great. That one's okay. It increases. Sorry, it doesn't increase anything. It gives them a chance to be feared for 2.5 seconds, which would probably be about 1 second for elite. So that's a little bit of a bonus. But I mean, I'd just recommend going for damage because you do need damage in the build to actually kill mobs. Otherwise, you're just never gonna work them down. Which, you know, you can have extra health mobs which might take you I don't know, 5 minutes. You might hit an rage possibly. So I'd recommend going for a battle rage in the build. But again, if you're having problems surviving, swap it for threatening shout or something else. Okay, now this is you must have this in your build. Do not make a build without this. Warcry with impunity. This is pretty much gives you, what is it? It's 20% armor for 60 seconds, but then with impunity, you get 50% increased resistance, which is gigantic. You know, if you're on 500 resistance, you get 750 all. It's crazy. Do not skip this talent out. It's definitely necessary. And make sure it's up 100% of the time while you're playing. Okay, so that's it for the main skills you're using. Passive skills can be modified for however you want, however you're feeling comfortable. This is what I use. I use tough as nails, which is 25% increased armor, which is a pretty big armor increase, so that's really good for survival. And then I use 2 damage passives. So the one I use is Weapons Master, and then I use a mace or an axe in my main hand, which is 10% critical chance. So how this works is it'll select the weapon based on your main hand weapon. So if I had a mace in my main hand, I'd get 10% critical chance. If I had a sword in my offhand, I would not get the 15% increased damage. But if I swap the sword to my main hand, I get the 15% increased damage, and I wouldn't get the 10% critical hit chance. So it selects kind of the weapon master based on your main hand weapon. Your offhand has nothing to do with it. And then I'm going with Ruthless as well, which is 5% increased crit chance and then 50% increased critical hit damage, which I find really good. It's too hard to pass these up. So obviously with those two, if you're using a mace or axe in your main hand, you get 15% increased critical chance, which is gigantic. Okay, so like I said, you can swap this around. So if you're having problems surviving, you know, if you're in Act 2 or 1 or 3, you know, I don't know why I said 2, 1 or 3, 1, 2 or 3, and you're kind of getting your ass kicked by the mobs, you might want to swap out possibly Weapons Master for something like Nerves of Steel, which could be increased armor based on your vitality. So if you have 800 vitality, 800 armor, simple. And then that armor gets increased by the 25% chance as well. And then you can swap out Ruthless for Superstition, which is when you take damage from a non-physical attack, you get 3 Fury, which is okay, I guess. But then it also reduces all non-physical damage by 20%. So Molten, Plagued, any kind of fire-type mobs, electric, anything will be reduced by 20%, which is also really nice. So you can kind of make your build look something like this, which is fully defensive. But I'd recommend keeping damage in your build, which is, I mean, I'd say damage in your build is just as important as defensive, because you do need to get the mobs down. So that's a look at the first spec. I'll post a link in the comment below, just so you can kind of copy and paste it yourself. But I would definitely say this is the most comfortable spec you can play in your Barbarian while learning how to play. So I definitely recommend doing this one. We'll go over the next spec now, though. This isn't the spec I'm going to go over next. I wouldn't recommend starting with a spec because you will kind of get your ass kicked using it. It is quite gear dependent, but yeah, I'll go over that. Okay, so this is the second spec. It's extremely fast, reliable, and it's really, really good for farming overall. The only downside to it is it's extremely, extremely gear dependent. So the idea of the build is you're using Whirlwind as your main attack, combined with Sprint. So I'll go over kind of the skills first and then how it works together. So your first primary skill will be Bash with 6% or 6 Fury generated per attack. So this kind of, when you're not whirlwinding and you're out of rage to actually whirlwind, you bash and you get your rage back extremely quickly. So your main, well, I say Bash is the main attack. This is really the main attack, Whirlwind. So you whirlwind around doing lots of damage. You're hitting, you know, every single mob on the screen. Getting lots of rage back. I'll go over that in a second. So you whirlwind around, and then you have your rune set to Hurricane, which allows you to run at movement speed while using Whirlwind. That combined with Sprint, with Run Like the Wild. When you're sprinting, you shoot tornadoes out, 60% weapon damage. So the idea is you're whirlwinding around, hitting every single mob on the screen, getting constant rage back, pretty much whirlwinding 100% of the time, and spamming sprints at the same time. So you're moving around really quickly while whirlwinding, hitting everything, you know, a bit quicker. And you're shooting out tornadoes at the same time. So those combined, you can shred down, you know, packs of white mobs instantly. elite pack so you can stay whirlwinding the whole time. It's really, really good, and the damage is crazy. So you have Wrath of the Berserker, and you want to use Thrive on Chaos. So every 25 rage gained, you get 1 second added on. So the idea is, with Battle Rage, when you're under the effect of Battle Rage, you get 15% additional Fury every critical hit. So when your crit's really high, you're constantly getting 15 Fury back non-stop. So with Wrath of the Berserker, you're getting 25 rage every, you get a second added on for every 25 rage. So the idea is these two work kind of together. You can keep Wrath of the Berserker up for constant amounts of time as long as you're hitting mobs and getting rage back. So you want to use Warcry with Impunity again, or Impunity, sorry, which is, your 50% increased resistances. So I guess the idea of the build is you're whirlwinding around, hitting every single mob over and over. You're getting life on hit from the tornadoes, and then I think they give life on hit, and then you're getting life on hit from Whirlwind constantly hitting. So you're getting constant life on hit back, and you're just doing crazy, crazy AoE damage, keeping Wrath of the Berserker up. It's extremely strong spec. The only downside is it's really gear dependent. You need really good damage, and you need really high defensive stats. If you don't have high defensive stats, high health, good life on hit, good damage, this build will not be good at all. I mean, even with my gear's decent. It's just not that effective. You need really crazy gear. So the passive skills are Animosity, which is increased Fury generation by 10%, which obviously goes hand in hand with keeping Whirlwind up, Wrath of Berserker, Battle Rage, everything at the same time, and it gives you 20% more maximum Fury as well, which is a little bonus. You want to use Weapon Mastery, and you want to get a weapon with critical hit chance, so a mace or an axe, so your critical hit chance is higher, making your Battle Rage into the fray proc even more. So that's kind of well, I wouldn't say necessary, but it's a huge bonus. And then Ruthless as well, 5% critical hit chance, and then 50% critical hit damage. So that's the build. I'll show you a clip of how to actually use it, but again, I wouldn't recommend using this build. I'd use the previous build I showed you until you're geared enough to farm Act 3 efficiently, then use this build. So again, don't use this build until you're really geared, otherwise you're gonna get really frustrated and throw your keyboard out the window. Alright guys, we're going to go on to some stats and gearing. Alright, so let's get looking at some gear and some stats. First thing I'll do is I'll show you the gear I'm using right now and the stats I'm using. These stats I'm currently farming Act 3, not the most efficiently out of all my characters. I'd say my monk's a bit more efficient, but I am farming it efficiently. I can kill every single elite pack. There's a couple that do give me problems though. So this is kind of like cookie cutter gear that will get you to that, to the point where you can farm Act 3. So it's just something to set an example of. I'm not showing my gear off or anything. So yeah, first thing you want to do on your weapons is you want life on hit and critical hit damage. So as you can see, I have strength and high life on hit on this one. The damage could be higher, but it's, I wasn't going to spend too much on it. And it's also a mace, which gives me 10% crit on my main hand. So as you can see, 41% crit, 31% crit. So make sure you have a mace in your main hand. Second weapon I'm using is strength, and then critical hit damage again, or well, not again, but critical hit damage, and then it has an open socket, so this has potentially 183% crit damage with a perfect gem. So that's kind of what you want in your weapons. You want life on hit combined with critical hit damage. If you can get both on each one, perfect. If you can't afford it, try to do what I did here and just have one of each. Okay, and then the rest of the gear, as you can see, I'm using Vitality, All Resist, and Strength on most of it. I will put a link in the comment section below for the actual gear link. So I went through with physical resist. You can get any resist as well as physical resist, and it's really good to have. As long as you have 2 resists, your overall resistance will be really high. The only reason I picked physical resistance is I find most elite packs do physical damage for the majority of them, so I find myself kind of really doing well against those. Okay, so what you want to do is you also want to aim for critical hit chance on all the items you can. So helm, neck, I know I don't have any, but yeah. Helm, neck, rings, and then gloves. You want critical hit chance on all of those, and your DPS will go really high, and I'll explain why in a minute. So that's gear I'm using. And stats, sitting on 500 resist, 946 physical resist when you use your shout, 700 plus, and then 1400. And that's those are pretty ideal stats for Act 3 to get it on farm. Okay, so stat priority for Acts 1 through 4 doesn't change. It follows. For your defensive stats, you want resists are kind of equal to armor. So if you can get resist and armor on a piece, it's perfect. I'd preferably go towards resistance though, if you can on your gear. So resists and armor are good. So like that one has both resist and armor, so it's perfect for survival. And then in terms of well, DPS and survival at the same time. You want to go for strength and vitality, because strength gives you armor, and then vitality gives you obviously health. And if you spec into it, it does give you armor as well. So that's your defensive stats in order. Resists and armor go first, and then strength and vitality go second. So you want to make sure you have resists on all of your gear. Obviously all of those stats in order, but yeah. And then for DPS, strength is your highest priority, followed by crit chance, followed by critical hit damage, followed by attack speed. Obviously you need a good base crit chance to make your critical hit damage effective. Otherwise, if you have like just pure, if you have no crit and critical hit damage, you don't have anything to base that critical hit off of, or critical hit damage off of. So yeah, you need high crit before you aim for critical hit damage, and I'd probably say about 30% plus is what you want to aim for before you start getting too much critical hit damage. And then life on hit, you want to aim for around, I'd say about 1,000 is an ideal spot. I'm at 1,400 right now, sorry, 1,300, and it seems pretty comfortable. Anything above that's pretty overkill, but I mean it works. So that's about it for stat priorities. That'll get you through all the acts. I'll type it up all on the screen so it's easier to follow, and I might make a little note below in the comments section. Okay, so now going into the different acts, recommended stats to go into Act 2, I'd recommend at least 300 to 400 resist all without your shout up, about 25 to 30k health, and about 20k DPS. Critical hit and damage don't really matter as long as your DPS is around 20k plus. That will get you through Act 2 comfortably. Well, you might have to struggle on a few packs, so yeah. Act 3, I'd recommend 500 plus resist all without your shout up, possibly 600, because some of the mobs do quite a bit of damage. You want to aim for about 1,000. I'd probably say 1,000 resist all with your shout up would be ideal for Act 3. That'll get you on farm perfectly. DPS, you don't want to go anywhere below 35k. If you're below 35k, your DPS will be not enough, and some mobs will take way too long to kill, which is never good. Oh, and then in terms of Act 1, Act 1 doesn't really matter what you have, as long as you have like around 200 resist all, you can farm it quite easily. Act 1 mobs don't really hit that hard, so your health and kind of armor alone will deflect most of their damage. And then Act 4, I'd say it's about the same stats as Act 3, maybe 100 more resist, so maybe 1,050 resist roughly. Because some of the mob types are actually a lot harder than they are in Act 3. Well, I find they are at least, so yeah. Okay, that about covers it for the gear. I'll post a link to my gear in the comment section below. As well as that, I'll put the stat priorities written down there just so you have something to look into instead of just listening to the video over and over. Next, I want to go on to the followers, because people, I mean, it might seem obvious to some people, but lots of people have been asking me, which follower do I use, which follower is best for barbarians and different situations, things. So let's go over the Scoundrel first. This is a follower I use 100% of the time. I never change it. First of all, for the build, I'm using the Crippling Shot, which is slow for 3 seconds. Dirty Fighting, which is a 3-second blind, which is really nice. Multi-Shot shoots 3 attacks. This is crucial. You definitely need this. And then finally, the Anatomy, which is a 3% critical hit for everyone in your party. That's probably, I'd say, the most important part of the Scoundrel. The 3% crit is really nice for DPS. It adds quite a bit, especially once you get geared and you get lots of critical hit damage. It multiplies your damage by quite a bit. Now, in terms of gearing him, his DPS isn't important. It literally means nothing. You want to get him with a cold damage bow with at least 3% plus with a chance to immobilize or slow or stun or any of the kind of CC effects. So you need cold damage and he'll slow more, and then you have a 3% chance to I have 3.6 chance to immobilize. That completely stops elites for about 1 second, which is nice. And then other than that, just stack him with Vitality. I went Vitality attack speed. Doesn't really matter. That's just so he, gets his slow out a bit faster. And then on his Scoundrel token, you want to use Vitality again. Whatever you want. I put Life on Hit, so Life on Hit's really effective on him. Critical hit damage doesn't do anything, but yeah. So just overall, just go for lots of Vitality, a cold bow with an effect, and he'll slow stuff, and it's noticeable. When you start kiting mobs in between cooldowns, etc., yeah, it's perfect. I mean, you literally, he just slows the crap out of everything, so that's perfect. The other one is the Enchantress. As you can see, I haven't even bothered to level or gear her because I don't use her, but she is good. I don't want to say she's not. So she uses Charm, which charms the enemy to fight you for 4 seconds. If she charms an elite or a non-elite near him, they do quite a bit of damage, which is always nice. This is probably the most important part, and this is why if you're struggling to survive, I would use her. 15% armor for all the time. So that's 100% of the time, 15% armor. Perfect, really nice. And then you get your disorient, which is also like another kind of blind effect, makes them walk around in circles. And then you have your focus mine, which is really nice for survival as well, because you get 3% attack speed, and that makes your life on hit even more. So that's perfect. In terms of gearing her, just go for vitality. You can go straight up vitality intelligence, and she'll do a bit of damage. Nothing too noticeable, but you know, something's better than nothing. But yeah, I mean, I'd recommend just using the Scoundrel for the DPS, unless you're, you know, having problems surviving. The Templar, I wouldn't really recommend, because I don't know, he doesn't seem to do that well. Maybe with a Whirlwind build, you could, I don't know, use the Fury generation or something, but I don't see him to be that good, really. But it's up to you. I'd recommend the Scoundrel. Unless you're having problems surviving, then the Enchantress. So yeah, next we'll go into a couple playstyles. I'm going to teach you guys how to kind of funnel mobs using doorways, kite in between cooldowns, and just generally kind of stay alive well against different types of mobs and things like that. Alright, so the first technique I want to show you, I call it funneling. I don't know if it actually has an actual name or not. It seems really obvious, but not many people are doing it. I live stream quite a bit, and people are like, oh, I never even thought to do that at all. I guess the general idea is you find you can do it anywhere in the game. You'll always find a spot. I'm just giving this as an example because it's a good example. You find a doorway, and you drag the mobs to it, and you have the first mob stand in the doorway. The mobs behind him can't get to you, obviously, and surround you, so you can just kind of funnel them in and fight them one at a time. You can do this, like, if you look around for small areas, you can pull most elite packs into these, and it makes those harder hitting ones really, really easy to kill. As you can see, these guys normally do tons of damage, but since I'm funneling them down, they're a lot easier. You can do it with range mobs as well. The pathing isn't always the greatest on range mobs, so if you kind of stand in the doorway, some of them won't stand in line of sight of you. They'll just stand around corners and things, like the yellow mob is doing there. It's tricky to do sometimes against mobs like Desecrators or Vortex mobs, but other than that, you can normally pull it off pretty successfully. Alright, the next technique I'm going to go over is, I call it cornering. Might have an official name, I'm not sure. But believe it or not, when you're, this is only to do with range mobs who kite you around. Believe it or not, you're actually in control of where they go. They don't control where you go. If you stand in front of them, they will move backwards. So if you stand in front of them towards a corner, you can push them back into that corner over and over again. This is a good example because it's a knockback group. It's the most kind of biggest pain in the ass for actual range mobs, but as you can see, I'm just pushing them over into the corner over and over again. If they weren't Desecrators or knockback, they'd literally sit in the corner and just die. They'd stand there and not move. But this is a good example because this is one of the ones that will give you the biggest kind of problem. So all you do is you just push them into the corner, you stand in front of them, and just make them keep going towards the wall. And whenever they kind of move away from you, you just move back and stand in front of them again towards the wall. It's really simple, and it really is really effective against these ranged mobs. As you can see here, they're just constantly in the corner. Normally they'd just be running around like crazy, and you wouldn't be able to hit any of them in the slightest. Alright guys, that about wraps it up for the Barbarian guide. I'm going to keep the actual technique section of the guide a bit shorter, mainly because I don't want to make another like, you know, 45-minute guide you have to watch. This one was mainly just so you can see which stats you want, the specs, etc. I am actually making a melee playstyle build, which will be out next week. That's going to go over it's going to work for monks and barbarians, and it's going to go over every single kind of technique you can use to survive on both classes, and just kind of general things that'll help you overall just stay alive. And I'm going to make an affix guide, which will follow soon after, which will have every single affix in the game and how to deal with them, just in general on every single class. So that'll be soon after that. So hopefully this was helpful, guys. You know, if you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to send me a message on my inbox, actually on YouTube. The best way to get a hold of me now, though, is I'm currently live streaming, which I will be actually linking in this comment section below. And I'm live streaming every day. If you sign up to a Twitch account, you can actually just ask me there live, and I will answer all questions. A question doesn't go unanswered on my live stream. I talk to every single person who talks to me. Alright, so my next guide will actually be I'll have the melee class, or well, the kind of melee survival guide coming out very shortly, followed by it'll be the Demon Hunter guide. It looks like the Witch Doctor guide will be last, but the Demon Hunter guide will be out next week. if not very early the week after, and the Witch Doctor one will follow it very closely. I'm going to get them out a bit quicker. I've been doing some kind of summary thing, so the guides haven't been coming out as quick. But yeah, guys, thanks for watching. Hopefully this is helpful. I'm signing out. I'll see you later.